This kind of policy is nonsense. If you can't be reached when the job depends on it, you're out. Who dreams up these ridiculous ideas? If someone tells me they're in silent mode, they're fired.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Kevin O'Leary, Canadian billionaire, Shark Tank host, he was commenting on a new Australian law that says that employees now can ignore their bosses after hours, which really seems like kind of common sense stuff. You know, if you're not going to be paying me to be on call. Now, obviously, it's different. If you're on call, like officially, and you're being paid to be on call, well, okay, there you go. That's fine.
That's part of the deal.
That's part of the deal. Exactly. But if you're not being paid to be on call and your supervisor, your manager, your boss can just text you or call you or email you at any time for any reason, and you're supposed to respond, that's kind of bonkers. And as one Australian lawmaker said, clocking out used to mean something. Yeah. And so in Australia, they have put in place this law to make it mean something again. And so the employers now have to put in place, you know, policies that inform workers that, you know, and it is specific, and there are some carve outs, like if there's an ultra emergency and they're going to be paid for it, you know, there are carve outs and stuff, but just, you know, each company now in Australia has to develop a policy that informs their workers of the new law and says you do not have to respond to text messages of, you know, regarding normal business items when you are clocked out, right? And that seems, you know, it's just super reasonable. And so it's difficult to imagine that, you know, somebody could have a problem with it. But there are people that have a problem with it, including Kevin O'Leary, Canadian billionaire and Shark Tank host. Unfortunately, we don't have a clip. I wish he had said this in an interview or something because the audio is always better. But he tweeted it out. He said, in Australia, employees can now ignore their bosses after hours. Let me ask you this. What happens during an emergency? Well, like I said, there are carve-outs in the law. But of course, you know, this kind of stuff, this is exactly what I was talking about the people who run our society not being any better than us, because that's just a super normal, like, you know, brain poisoned uncle thing to do. Like, this guy just read a headline and wondered and had a question, what happens during an emergency, and didn't even read, you know, I haven't read the law. I'm not going to say I've read the law, but I have read 2 or 3 articles about it, right? And in all those articles, they mention how there are some carve-outs and there's, you know, different things. And so he had a question, and he didn't even look beyond the headline, and he just tweeted it out as if he's the first person to have this thought. What happens during an emergency? What if the building is literally burning down and my baby is inside of my work building and the only person who has the key is my employee who I pay minimum wage? What am I going to do then? Well, you're the first person to ever have that thought, Kevin O'Leary, because you're so smart and important. And so you don't even, because you're so smart and important, you don't even have to look and see if it's addressed anywhere in the law. You can just tweet this out because you can be assured of your smartness and importantness. And you don't even have to do any of this due diligence kind of stuff, right? And so it's just so frustrating that, you know, these are the people that run our society. They're not any better than you, I promise you. Okay, what happens during an emergency? I don't know. Maybe you should read. This kind of policy, this is Kevin O'Leary again, this kind of policy is nonsense. If you can't be reached when the job depends on it, you're out. Who dreams up these ridiculous ideas? If someone tells me they're in silent mode, they're fired. Well, there you go. Hey, 5 seconds, just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate. It's just amazing that people can just say this stuff. And this is another part of the entitlement, right? That these bosses and employers and the people who run our society, they have. They believe they are entitled to not only the majority of the time that we are conscious, not only that's not enough for them. They believe they're entitled to the entirety of the time that we are conscious. We should be on call without pay for these people the entirety of the time that we are conscious and unconscious. Our boss should be able to call us in the middle of the night when we are asleep trying to, be ready for work the next day so we can be productive. They should be able to call us in the middle of the night for any reason they want and get our response. I mean, just imagine the entitlement. It's really difficult to get in that kind of headspace where I believe that I am entitled to 24 hours of a person's attention without compensating them for 24 hours. It's just bonkers.
I used to get so upset when I would represent educators and, principals or other people in administration would send these emails after school hours and then expect them to show up the next school day, like having read the email and following whatever instructions were in the email. And it's like, listen, when I'm home, I shouldn't have to be responsible for your communication that you chose to make after work hours.
Yeah.
And I think the whole the notion that it's ridiculous to think that you should have some time free from your boss, it really does speak to the entitlement to the the entitlement to your time that you should have no time that is completely separate, free. I appreciate what that politician said about clocking out used to mean something, because as we are more connected and as our bosses can reach out to us at any time, it is something that we have to deal with. And I know other countries are dealing with this. It's something I would like to see addressed here in this country as well. And it's something that obviously a lot of unions do address in their contracts. Right. That's something that I know gets talked about at the bargaining table. And so there again, if this is an issue that you're dealing with in the workplace, all the more reason to organize and have a union.
Exactly. Yeah. And his whole, this whole thing is being driven, like I said, by entitlement. And yet his thought about the people who support this, who believe that folks who work for a living should be able to be the owners of their time after they clock out, he thinks that's entitled. Right? I mean, that's the premise behind these statements that he's making. Who dreams up these ridiculous ideas? If somebody tells me they're in silent mode, they're fired, right? As if it's too much to ask, as if the worker who says, I'm done with work when I clock out, is being entitled and asking too much and is being greedy. Yeah, I mean, it just the topsy-turviness,
Right. I mean, listen, if you are a boss and you contact your worker outside of work hours, and I say you're a worker, right? Because that's how you perceive it, like they're yours.
Right.
You contact them after work hours, they don't respond, and you fire them for that, you're garbage. You're garbage, right? I mean, like, you should not be held responsible if your management reaches out to you when you're off the clock, when you're off the grid, right? That's how you should be perceived. If it's a genuine emergency, that's one thing.
And then you can be paid for working that genuine emergency. And then you can be paid
for working that genuine emergency, and you can count that time, and it's all going to work out, right? It is what it is. Emergencies happen. But that's not really what he's talking about. Right. He again, thinks he's entitled to be able to reach out to folks any given time. And I'm sorry, but even when I would just say from my personal experience, when I've had managers who were inclined to be that way, I just ignored them. Right. Like, and that's something I advised other workers to do. Like, I dare them to punish me for something I can't be held responsible for. Granted, we had rights to grievances and due process rights, and not every worker enjoys those rights. So,
you gotta do what you gotta do to keep your job. You gotta
pick your battles. You gotta pick your battles and be strategic.
But that's why you should unionize. If you're in one of these workplaces where you don't have due process rights and you don't have a union contract, you don't have a grievance procedure or anything like that, and you can be like it. And, this is the state of affairs in the American economy. If you don't have a union contract, you can be fired for not responding to after hours work requests.
That is very true.
Which is bonkers, but that's the state of the American economy. And so, you have to do what you have to do to keep your job. But while you're doing what you have to do to keep your job, you should also unionize, because you should not have to put up with this kind of entitled BS from your employer.
Right. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
then after we unionize enough people and get enough political power among the organized working class, we can make it illegal.
Absolutely.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.
Which side are you